Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, friends, a good day. It's our pleasure to start our fifth annual presentation of our foreign policy scorecards. We do it on annual basis, and it's a signature project for Ukrainian Prism and Ebert-Stiftung, I believe so. And I think that we will proceed in the way we have proposed in our draft program. We'll have some welcome remarks from me, essentially, and from my colleague from Ebert-Stiftung, Maksak. Then we will have presentation of our research, our study. Hanna Shelest will cover the core achievements we found during the study. And then we will propose to our distinguished participants from MFA to deliver their thoughts about assessment, about its relevance, and about positions we have in different directions. If it's okay, I would like to give the floor to friend of Ukrainian Prism and our partner, Director of Regional Office of Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Foundation, Marcel. Marcel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hennadiy. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, on behalf of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's online discussion on Ukraine's foreign policy. It is an unusual format this year. While in the years before we met at the Diplomatic Academy, this year we meet in our offices, living rooms, gardens, dachas, balconies, whatsoever, as long as the internet connection is good enough. Unusual times, but probably one of the best times to discuss foreign policy when we jointly find global threats, united in keeping distance. As you may know, the study on Ukraine's foreign policy is a continuous project that is implemented each and every year using a specific scorecard method. By this, we managed to give school marks to about 50 policy directions. 2019 is the first year of President Volodymyr Zelensky's presidency, and with each change in the office, you have changes on practically all political levels. Of course, you can measure first year foreign policy pretty well. Some activities come to a halt during the transformation of power. Some directions intensify due to new priorities and other values. The main thing is not to lose a momentum, and if you do, to quickly find new momentums. But we also want to look beyond that. What are the conclusions we make for the future foreign policy of Ukraine? Are there directions that Ukraine wants to intensify? What are the prospects of the Minsk process and the Normandy format? And how can the European and Euro-Atlantic integration be further strengthened? And finally, of course, what does Corona mean to Ukraine's foreign policy? And that is why we are very grateful to have Minister Dmytro Kuleba with us, who will both comment on the results, but also share with us his vision on the future priorities of Ukraine's foreign policy. Experts from the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism, and our colleagues from leading Ukrainian think tanks have analyzed those 50 directions of Ukraine's foreign policy. Thanks to all of you for the amazing work behind all of that. The floor is yours.
Marcel, thank you very much both for your welcome remarks and also for your stable support to this project. We believe it is very important to see this comprehensive study with all the scorecards. We know that sometimes maybe we see it from another position, but when you have this comprehensive overarching assessment, I think it helps not only us as experts, but both to those who make decisions in foreign policy domain. On my side, as the head of Ukrainian Prism, let me also share my gratitude for being partners with Ebert-Stiftung Foundation and also for the great help from MFA side, because in this project we, as in previous ones, we tried to fact check all the information we have vis-a-vis each direction on foreign policy, because it helps us to be on the same page with diplomats, with our parliamentarians when it comes to real execution or performing on foreign policy. This is very important. You mentioned, Marcel, that we have 50 directions. It's a very delicate issue to combine all the direction under one methodology. And I'm grateful for all our team of experts. We have more than 20 experts taking part each year in this assessment. So I think it's a great work done, and especially many thanks to Hanna and Nadia for editing all this big and very different stuff into one publication, which now is very comfortable for reading. With this, I would like maybe to go to our work and to give the floor to Hanna. But before that, let me also share with you some other housekeeping remarks. We have on this dashboard the button questions and answers. If you have some questions to be asked or to be directed to our expert from Ukrainian Prism, or both to Foreign Minister or Political Director Petro-Beshta, please go ahead and we will happily try to answer that. If there is no time for answering in voice, we would try to also to give you answers in this Q&A part, in this Q&A box. So basically, please feel free to challenge us with your questions. Another issue, if you want to make a comment to contribute to the discussion, please raise your hand. There is a special button on your dashboard, and we will see, and we'll try to make it possible for you also to deliver your comments. And we will be having also 2 polls during this time on some foreign policy issues. Please take part in that, and you will see also on the screen the results maybe in 2 minutes after you have voted for a special option. With this, I would like to propose such kind of our activity. I will give the floor to Hanna Shelest. She will try to make it briefly, but I know that she has a lot of slides to share with you. And then we will ask Foreign Minister and Political Director Petro-Beshta to comment on the results we will present. We will have also with us our colleague Hennadiy. She will assist us in answering your questions if we will have some specific questions about the methodology or other issues. With this, Hanna, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Gennady. It's a great pleasure to see so many participants to join us online. It's difficult to make the presentation not in our regular style, not seeing all your reactions and not having a possibility to make a big slides behind me. So as for now, I will share the screen and you will see some of the slides with the marks. So it would be easier to follow, because unfortunately you can't keep the books in your hands as it is usually. However, you already can go to our website, prismua.org, and there are both English and Ukrainian versions of the scorecards are already available. You can download the PDF, or you can see the separate countries. So for those for whom Ukrainian slides will be difficult, feel free to open the original at the our website. And definitely 400 pages that we have this year will be very difficult to put in just 10 minutes maximum that I promised. However, I hope we will be able to highlight the basics, at least the main results of what we have. So first of all, a few of the innovations that we have this year. For those who were with us previously, you probably remember that we had 49 directions of the foreign policy. This year we have 50, and that is happening because we added one very important country, one our neighbor, Czech Republic. So now all neighbors of Ukraine are in the scorecards. The second difference of this year that we have not only results of 2019, so annual results as we used to have, but we made a small summaries of 2015, 2019 for each of the directions to see the evaluation of the foreign policy in one or another thematical or geographical directions. So for those of you who are first and fresh with our research, we would like to remind how it was happening. So we evaluated each of the directions by 5 indicators: political interest, institutional cooperation, strategic vision, activities, and results. Activities and results, all understandable. Strategic vision, it is analysis of Ukrainian internal domestic documents and bilateral agreements. Institutional cooperation, it is how Ukrainian institutions cooperated in this direction or interacted between each other. And political interest, the most interesting probably of these indicators, it is how members of parliament, president, cabinet of ministers, all others involved in the political process expressed their opinions that were in single voice or in different voices about this direction of the foreign policy. So in each direction you could receive from 1 to 5, then it is arithmetic average, and we are with the marks that you can see in the table. So first of all, what is the general marks that we have for 2019? Ukrainian foreign policy received C+. As you can see that comparing with the previous year where we had B-, it is C+, a little bit of decrease. And if you see it in numbers, it is really very, very small changes. However, why it has happened? It has happened, first of all, because of the political interest decrease, and the year of elections demonstrated it clearly that neither the presidential candidates nor parliamentary parties were interested that much in the foreign policy. And because of the change of the political teams, we had the decrease in institutional cooperation. And many of you remember the several scandals that unfortunately we have in summer because of the change of the political teams, cabinet of minister, and all following events. As a result, definitely it influenced the scores for results, because when you have less political interest, you can't have the same level of results in the end of the year. So when we see in general political interest, so predominantly there were interests only in 3 topics. First of all, it is European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And then you will see by our marks that the best results were definitely in these directions. Then we see consolidation of international support towards the Russian aggression. Here you had high political interest, but not that good results. So quite dubious, let's say, scores that we received. And the third one, it is relations with our neighbors. Especially by the end of the year, we had certain increase in the political interest towards this topic. The United States, Germany, and France, as usually, received the highest political interest scores because, again, not because of the bilateral relations with these countries, but more because of the necessity to build up international coalition against the Russian Federation and Minsk process, surely the Normandy negotiations that we had in the end of the year. So first of all, as usually, we have our marks with the G7 countries. And here, nobody this year received A. Even the previous year, we had few countries with the best results. At the same time, we had the situation that, first of all, Japan received much better scores than the last year, and the presidential visits to this country really helped. We had a slight decrease with Canada and the United States of America, and here it is really strange, sometimes can be perceived by some of our listeners, because you saw a lot of activities. But it is always the question that what is said, what is done, and what is the result of many of these actions. So for those who would like to see it more in detail, you will find it in the respected chapters. The United Kingdom stayed with the same mark, However, you will see that despite the very difficult year that we had both in Ukraine and the United Kingdom in terms of the domestic policy, by fact, we really managed to secure the same level of activities and the quite a good level of dialogue considering the Brexit and the necessity of Ukraine to establish de facto new relations with the post-Brexit London. European integration is usually the best marks. And here we divide it into the three: European Union with the political and economic cooperation. We have Eastern Partnership and European Energy Union. Here we would say that Eastern Partnership last year received higher scores than the previous year due to the changes and evaluation of the Eastern Partnership program as a whole. So definitely we received more activities and more political interest. European Union, it was even difficult to choose what were the main events, and with the summit in July in Kyiv, the highest political interest and definitely the best results considering all situation that we had. NATO, or Euro-Atlantic integration. As you will see, the general scores fall a little bit, decrease comparing to 2018. First and foremost, it is political interest and institutional cooperation, as you can see by the respective lines in our table. The reason is definitely that, first of all, we had different approaches, and even the new political team during the presidential campaign and by the end of the year had quite a difficult level of approach towards the NATO topic. And we saw it from the almost absence in the presidential campaign statements to the big event in the end of October in Kyiv, where the very important statements were done about the future of Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. If we go further, the bilateral relations, our favorite topic, it's always difficult to choose which of the countries to evaluate. And as I said, this year we had one additional country, it is the Czech Republic. And now we had all neighbors set here. What we can see if compare with the previous years, and for the comparison you can open the big PDF file, but I will tell you a few things that we see. For surely we had quite a good increase with Belarus due to the forum that we had in 2019, where both presidents participated, many agreements signed. We had increase in relations with Israel because of the visit of the Prime Minister of Israel to Kyiv. We had good points with Lithuania because of the Ukrainian president visit to Baltic states. But unfortunately, we had very bad decrease with few countries that are important for Ukraine. First of all, I would like to speak about Moldova and Romania, where Ukraine lost momentum comparing to 2018 and 17, where we increased relations with these two important neighbors. We had decrease in relations with China. Again, for a long time, we saw the absence of the interest towards this country. And I hope that with the new idea of the minister, we finally pay attention to Asia and to China a little bit more. And surely Hungary, despite all expectations, didn't work that well as expected. Regional cooperation. As usually, we had not only country approaches, but we also see few of the regions around the world. Some are as Asia-Pacific region or South Asia, we consider them as the whole because Ukraine is not that active there, and it would be impossible to evaluate just country by country. Some others, like for example, the Black Sea region or Visegrad group, are those that Ukraine needs regional policies, and very important to see, can we evaluate only bilateral relations, or we can see the vision towards the region or the policy towards the region. Again, only Baltic states received the highest marks. So A is only with Baltic states, where we see visits of the president to all three countries, where we had active cooperation at the parliamentary level. And as usually for outsiders, it is Central Asia, where Ukraine is almost absent. And it is very bad marks for South Asia, for Middle East, and for the Western Balkans.
Hanna, to jump in. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba just joined our discussion. Welcome, Foreign Minister. And the only issue, he has only 15 minutes to stay with us. If you can shorten your presentation to listen to the assessment of.
We have 3 last slides, so it will be really quickly for us. So as you can see that despite the statements that were at the political level about Black Sea region, for example, or the Middle Eastern countries, with the final results and scores, we don't see that increase as have been expected the year before. International organizations, not good, not bad. So it is much better than could be. But as you can imagine, why these scores appeared not A but B this year. Considering the United Nations, we had the decrease of activities of Ukraine in other formats, except of the protecting Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, meaning that Ukraine participated much less than previous years in the multilateral initiatives within the United Nations formats. And we saw much less participation of members of parliament, for example, or ministers in the public events under the UN auspices. Council of Europe, I think that I don't need to evaluate the situation that we had with the return of the Russian Federation. So definitely it influenced a little bit the final scores. Initiatives of the multilateral character. Here we have, unfortunately, 2 very serious decreases. First of all, it is nuclear non-proliferation, where Ukraine doesn't use like those benefits that we can have as the country that rejected the nuclear arsenal. And with each year, we see the decrease of the scores. The same with the international security. What is very pity, if for first years we could explain it with the conflict with the Russian Federation. However, we see that Ukraine is losing its interest in the international security issues, even such as, for example, Transnistrian conflict. So neither mediation nor the peacekeeping, nor reflecting of the most topical issues of the international security agenda. Terrorism, all others is absent. So if we go further, just very quickly, economic diplomacy increased. And as we understand, it's happened predominantly because the political interest toward the economic diplomacy seriously increased in 2019. Public diplomacy stayed the same, but we saw certain increase in the activities, very successful activities. So as soon as it go with the same speed, next year we can see the better marks. And we have better scores for the Ukrainians abroad, because here we saw certain, at least attention to the topic, more comprehensive attention to the topic of not only Ukrainian diaspora, but also of the labor migrants and protection of the Ukrainians abroad to the previous year. So the development is also visible. Recommendations, you will find 134 recommendations in the book itself. As I said, already available at our website. I will not go with all of them. As for now, we can leave it for the Q&A. But we would say that definitely our experts more and more speak about the comprehensive approach, about necessity to draft the regional visions or policies, about necessity to plan better the public diplomacy activities in certain countries to widen the scope of these activities, about the participation in different forums, and about the necessity of the high-level visits to the certain countries. So not to concentrate only on the visa liberalization or trade increase. And here we are with the website that definitely you go just to the prismua.org, and our books are available in both languages, so just switch the language Ukrainian or English and you can already download them.
Hanna, thank you so much for this brief time. You tried to cram all the information from 400 pages. I think it was brilliant from your side. Now I would like to turn to Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and to ask about, Your Excellency, about your assessment of the effectiveness and results of the previous year. And do you agree with the marks we have put for foreign policy performance last year? And it is our pleasure that you are not a new key to this block, to our assessment, being a permanent representative of Ukraine to Council of Europe. You assisted us also with fact-checking about your profile, about your direction. So it's our pleasure to have you as a foreign minister in this discussion. So please, Dmytro, the floor is yours.
The pleasure is all mine. I'm welcome the distinguished online gathering, and I wish you good health. Well, you know, I take your analysis rather as a guidance than an assessment, as a good starting point for us to evaluate the state of affairs. I'm glad that your product is getting better and better with every next year. I remember Hennadiy in 2014 when he was only starting the Ukrainian Prism, and I think it's at least that was when I learned about Ukrainian Prism, and I'm happy that the institution ensured its sustainability, and we can check results and continuity from year to year, because this is what is fundamental, to see picture in a long term. All I can say is that I'm fine. I appreciate a good grade you gave to our relations with the European Union. I was in charge of the issue for the last 4 months of 2019, and so in that sense, I have I feel my own contribution to it. And of course, I cannot not mention the Council of Europe, where I served as ambassador. So in that sense, I take part of the I assume part of the responsibility for both successes and failures. Everything else, as I mentioned, we take as guidance. Your analysis confirms my estimations when it comes to Asia. Especially to Central Asia. I fully agree that this region is almost lost and we have to start building from scratch. But we have very good opportunities there, and we will try to restore our influence and contacts in this region. I will be happy to see more more Asian country-specific analysis in your evaluation. You currently had only China on your list. I think we should start looking seriously at India and Japan, Korea, South Korea, Singapore. I mean, big countries which are big players and which will, in their region, which have global influence and which we will be in our focus as well. All in all, my concept of foreign policy is very simple. I want Ukraine to develop as a European democracy with strong transatlantic ties and deep relations with Asia. I wish I had all necessary resources to ensure that we develop as a global power, covering all the regions simultaneously, but since this is not the case, we have to focus, and therefore, in terms of regional vectors, these are the focuses: EU, NATO, United States, Canada, I mean North America, and Asia. These are my kind of personal features. As this will be my personal features and priorities as long as I serve in this position. The last thing is on public diplomacy. We defended the budget, some budgets from full cut to reasonable cuts related to public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy, and we will be working hard to ensure that this element of foreign policy continues to develop and we maintain positive dynamics. Finally, I hope that your network will be growing, that your methodology will continue to evolve in towards a more further fine-tuned way. And I will be looking forward to your next analysis, foreign policy of 2020. If I survive as the minister until the next year, I will be happy to discuss in all details all the results of your future analysis. Thank you all. If you have any questions, I have 5 minutes to answer, so I can take 1 or 2 questions.
For me, thank you so much for your warm words about Ukrainian Prism and our methodology, about our product. We do want to be instrumental, maybe not guidance, but as a help, assistance to diplomats and those who take decisions in foreign policy domain to have to organize activity. I think Anna could add about Japan and about India in our research. Anna, please. Shortly.
Very briefly, Japan is present as a separate course. You can find it not in the bilateral relations, but under the G7 countries. So Japan is present from the very first day. If we speak about India, definitely now it is in South Asia, but as soon as you open, luckily or unluckily, it is predominantly India. And our wonderful expert, Olga Varashbir, is recommending for the 2nd year that we need to pay more attention to India and probably to introduce additional embassies within that region, because India alone is covering 6 countries that don't allow to concentrate that much on India itself. But it is well noted. South Korea and Singapore, I would like to see more Asia, but probably it will depend on you as a minister. If our Asia strategy works, we are ready to analyze those countries that are becoming at the top of the Ukrainian foreign policy agenda.
Thank you, Hanna. And now we have 2 questions to Foreign Minister, even 3. I will start with the one which is associated to the Asia direction. What are Ukraine's primary interests in Central Asia? This is a question from Susan Stewart from Germany.
We have to restore all the connections and friendships which we had with the countries of Central Asia. We have to open these markets of these countries for Ukrainian companies and for their exports, and more importantly for those companies which are able to implement infrastructure projects, probably in synergy with companies from other countries who are already present there. But we had very good cooperation in that field, and we can continue. And I'm confident that economy always leads to politics. So strengthening political ties and regional connections through developing economic cooperation is one of those, is also one of priorities.
Thank you, Minister. And another question about another region. Do you have interest towards Latin America and Caribbean region?
Yes, I do have interest towards Latin America. We have a lot of, different kind of levels of relations with countries of Latin America. One of the last issues I was personally addressing is how to reset relations with Cuba, our good traditional partner. We have a lot to do together in the field of economy and healthcare. Politics is not something that we are really looking at when we approach Cuba, but traditionally we had good economic and people-to-people contact and economic relations and healthcare. We seriously lost positions in Brazil over the last years, and we have to look for the ways on how to restore our positions in that important country. As I said, of course, we will be dealing with entire world. We have Latin America, we have North Africa, we have Central Africa. There are many regions. All of the regions of the world will be on the agenda. But if you deal with everything at the same time, you will waste all of your resources. So I mentioned my priorities, but it doesn't mean that I will neglect other regions of the world or will not consider them as important for Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Another question, will Ukraine join gas market of EU this year? Your vision?
Well, my vision is that we should eventually join not only gas market, but but we should become an integral part of internal market of the European Union in general, as it is stipulated by the association agreement. And this is a fundamental goal for us. When it comes to gas market, of course, we have achieved a lot on that track. Probably our integration in the energy market is one of the most advanced, and I will pay attention to that as minister, but now this question should be better addressed to my colleague, Vice Prime Minister for European Integration and Ministry of Energy. From my side, I will be pushing for further integration of Ukraine into the European Union within the mandate of the foreign minister.
And maybe another bliss question about the date of Ukraine Reform Conference. Osip asked, will the conference change its date or?
Will.
Do you know preliminary tentative?
It's still being discussed, but we all understand that conferences and the summits will not be resumed anytime soon. So we have to look for alternative dates.
And if I may abuse your time, because we have very important questions about Normandy meeting, could you just tell us some details about the next meeting and about the plan we have from the Ukrainian side?
The next Normandy meeting will take place in Berlin. This is for certain.
Okay.
When everything else is under discussion.
Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Bye-bye.
Our pleasure, and we do hope that next year we will assess your realm in year period of 2020.
Good. I'm looking forward to it. Have a good day and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you so much. And we do hope that Political Director Petro-Beshta will stay with us. Dear friends, now we are in full sway of Q&A session. So those are questions which have not been covered by Foreign Minister because of the lack of time. We will try to address them to Petro-Beshta, who is the Political Director of Ukrainian MFA. Petro, do you know about the strategy of cultural diplomacy of Ukrainian Institute? Is there any possibility to see it, to have it?
I think it should be. So we put our more resources and we prioritize enhancement of information policy and public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy. And this is the whole process that started with the Ukrainian Institute. And of course, I think that we need a strategy of cultural diplomacy so that it be put into the wider context of the public diplomacy of the MFA.
Thank you. Next issue, which is important for our participants. Do you have the system of monitoring by our diplomatic missions of countering Russian terrorism, especially in information domain and cyberspace. Do you know such kind of monitoring? Do you know? Do you have such kind of monitoring?
Of course, our embassies abroad and our special institutions of Ukraine, they monitor and follow all the activities of Russia when they put a threat to Ukraine, to our partner states. Of course, we also make a research of the overall policies of Russia in different realms in the framework of the hybrid approach. So we understand it as a multi-layered, multi-track types of intrusion into different spheres. And we cooperate with partners in these spheres so that we could better understand the nature of these threats. These threats are constantly evolving, and we need to get a knowledge of it and try to prevent such a threat and to cooperate to combat them in a coordinated way.
Thank you. And I think that just to give you such a question about international assistance for restoring Ukrainian infrastructure in Donbass, what measures are taken by Ukrainian side?
Of course, we are working on that for a long period of time already, and the first focus is territories affected by the conflict in Donbass, which are situated in the controlled area, which government controls, so it's near front territories, and we work with our partners, with the European partners and G7 partners, so that we try to distill a particular projects in these territories. We believe it is very important. It's our priority, so that we build a reformed and developed Ukraine in these territories, so that we put a soft power approach towards the occupied territories of Donbass, and we work with partners on that. The second focus is Mariupol and those Black Sea territories, as long as they are affected by the Russian aggressive policy in the Kerch Strait and Azov Sea. So European states, they also discover this territory as a territory for more investment, for more risk assessment. We look at the situation in the Kerch Strait and in the Azov Sea, so that these territories do not suffer from this blockade of the sea lines through the Black Sea. And of course, the occupied territories of Donbass, we look forward for the possibilities for the new environment that could be established on these territories, as long as the security issues would be resolved in the framework of all different formats. And as long as we see a significant progress on that, we believe that we will move forward significantly also on the issues of economic revival of these territories, for example, in the framework of the working group of the TCG, of the economic working group.
Thank you. And another question is somehow connected to the previous with public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy. Which are your priorities or specific projects in public diplomacy at EU level and dialogue with EU citizens? Do you have some specific project in that domain?
I think that if we want to talk deeply into the domain of the public diplomacy, we should dedicate another meeting on that and invite our director for public diplomacy to talk on that. But in general terms, of course, European Union and Europe as a whole is a focus of our public diplomacy efforts, and we put a lot of resources and effort on that.
Okay, thank you so much. How do you find Ukraine's cooperation with BRICS countries?
As long as the minister mentioned that we have a clear new fresh look at the global map and of our priorities, and we see that the Asia as such, including China, including India, is a underdeveloped direction of the foreign policy. If you mentioned the article by the minister a couple of weeks ago, this is one of the priorities of our foreign policy. We understand that for a long time, this region, Asia Pacific, including China and India, is becoming a dominating region from the point of view of trade, of production, of technologies, of investment. So it is a new priority of the foreign policy, and we think that we have in coming years to significantly increase the presence of Ukraine, its businesses, its in this region, and of course it also includes Africa and South Africa as a leading state.
Thank you so much, Political Director. For you to have a little break, I would like to switch to Hanna, and there were some questions about Georgia. Could you elaborate on that, Hanna?
Yes, thanks a lot. We have several questions about Georgia. I will unite them in one. For those who are not following the chat, the question is in general how COVID can influence our bilateral relations, and definitely the hot topic of possible Mr. Saakashvili return to the governmental positions in Ukraine. So first of all, I would like to notice that this year we have B-, and it is the same score as we had last year for Georgia. The issue is that we had the real intensification of the political dialogue since 2018. Elections spoiled a little bit. I mean, it slowed down the relations in 2019. And unfortunately, the visit of the Georgian president to Ukraine was postponed to beginning of 2020. Now we're in 2020, and we understand that due to the COVID, such visits are impossible. However, it looks that COVID can give later additional topics for cooperation. Georgia is the best among 3 Caucasus countries in fighting COVID, because we still have not only bilateral dialogue, but all the perspectives within the so-called A3 format, association countries, those who signed association agreements with the European Union, Eastern Partnership cooperation, Black Sea cooperation, where Ukrainian and Georgian interests really coincide. And we hope that as soon as the pandemic crisis is over, we will be able to start at the different levels expert political economic cooperation between 2 states, because it is the request from 2 sides. Mr. Saakashvili, as our Estonian colleagues asked, as I see the Diplomatic Academy of Estonia is asking, it is very difficult and controversial question inside of Ukraine. We already see that appointment of Mr. Saakashvili as the governor of Odessa region a few years ago affected relations between Ukraine and Georgia. But unfortunately, political will in the country, and we need to see how now the parliament, first of all, will react to this idea of the office of the president. And we should already calculate the risks of the Georgian reaction, because since yesterday we started to hear at the different political levels from Georgia quite a negative reaction to this possibility.
Thank you so much. And I have to reiterate the possibility to have intervention comment on side of our participants. Please raise your hand. There is a special button on your dashboard, and we will try to connect you to our discussion. Now we turn to other questions we have already been put. So back to Mr. Beshta. There is a question about, I will try to cite it, the potential intensification of anti-system and right-wing political forces in EU member states that use the COVID-19 situation for their own purposes in combination with active international campaign of Russian Federation. Is there is the threat for solidarity. So what basically what is Ukrainian strategy for this region, for EU, for countries like Italy and others which have these effects? Dmytro?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a very important question because Russia, of course, uses every possibility to undermine the unity of the international coalition, which tries to combat Russian aggressive policy in Ukraine, in Georgia, and in Europe as a whole. COVID is, of course, a good opportunity for Russia to work to that end. And of course, we intensify contact with key partners in Europe and in transatlantic on this particular issue. And as long as we see, we have a very strong statements on the part of Mr. Borrell and other leaders in Europe, so that we all support the call of Mr. Guterres to provide a sustainable and full ceasefire, to stop all activities in all conflicts. And we also emphasize the need for Donbass to take part in this initiative, so that the full and sustainable ceasefire will be introduced and kept on this territory. And of course, we also stay clear with our partners that no types of sanctions which were introduced toward Russia influencing their abilities to combat COVID or to take part in the international efforts on combating COVID. So as long as I see and feel, it is very clear for Europe and for our partners that there is no interlinkages in this. Of course, Russia will continue this type of policy in the framework of the UN, of course, as we see their second effort to introduce a resolution in the General Assembly on the matter. But Ukraine is trying to assist and help and to cooperate with every country, including Italy in Europe, which is heavily affected by the COVID virus. And as long as you probably know, a delegation of Ukrainian doctors have visited Italy. They supported Italy, our friends there, in their combat, and they successfully have returned to Ukraine with a new experience in this sphere.
Thank you so much. And there is repeated questions about borders. What are chances that Ukraine's borders might be open for at least personal car travelers with all neighbors, including Russia, if not mass passenger exchange by planes or trains? Do you have any kind of insight on that?
I think that this answer should be guided by two issues. The first one is a overall plan of the Ukrainian governments concerning the relaxing of these measures on the territory of Ukraine, and also it will take into the account the same measures, the same relaxing undertakings by our partners, by our borders, so that I think that it all should be coordinated.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so basically maybe one or two last questions to Mr. Beshta. There is a question from Vitaly. Would rapprochement relations with China harm Ukraine's ties with the US? What's your opinion on that?
I believe that in the framework of our enhanced focus on the Asia as a whole and China as a central state in Asia, we would like to find the right balance in our close strategic partnership with the United States, and on the other side of our mainly economical interest to develop cooperation with China.
And I would like to ask the final question to Mr. Beshta. I know that there are a lot of, we'll try to address them either in mailing or in other form, but I think it's very important questions about our neighbors and pandemic situation. Is this pandemic a new beginning between Ukraine and its neighbors, as Poland, Hungary, and Romania? What steps should be implemented? Just connected to these COVID-related issues.
I think that any type of crisis, any type of challenge common to states, to the coalitions, in this case to Ukraine and our neighbors, it is not only a good possibility, it is a necessity for us to forget or to solve some problems, some hindrances that stiffen our dialogue. And I believe that when the pandemic is over in some future, we will have a fresh look on our partnerships, and we will pay more attention to the issues of how did we cooperate on tackling these common challenges, how we could assist each other. That could be an important factor of reassessment of our partnerships. And in general, I believe that we have a good positive trajectory of enhanced cooperation with our neighbors, which I'm sure will be still enhanced in the post-pandemic period.
Thank you so much, Political Director. I think it was quite a comprehensive set of questions to cover, either regional-wise, either functional. I would like to turn to Hanna, maybe to make some final remarks and maybe to touch upon some questions which we still have uncovered yet. Hanna, please, mic.
Yes, sorry, was trying to put our final presentation again to the website so you can see the results. And first of all, definitely what you see, the results of our poll. That is what all of you voted, that what Ukraine is lacking and should be improved. It is the strategic vision of the foreign policy. And we hope that our first recommendation in the scorecards 2019 saying exactly about this is well heard and supported by those who are watching our presentation today. So as a final mark, first of all, I would like to return back to the website where you can download the full report, both in Ukrainian and in English. You also can find there the previous year's reports in case you would like to compare more in detail. And we hope that in the near months, depends on the post offices around the world and in Ukraine as well, we will be able to send a certain amount of copies to our partner institutions, to the embassies and MFAs. And if we can't share it as usually live with you and personal, at least the post services should work better this year during the pandemic restrictions. So definitely this year it was extremely difficult to analyze because of the changes of the political teams. And even if they had 6 and 6 months as de facto, but all the changes influenced significantly. And we understand that certain lacunes could be within the analysis, as we also tried to sharpen it within the limits of reading possibilities. And many of these directions can need additional evaluation for the next years. And thanks for the comments from the minister in the beginning. Next year, as we understand, will be even more difficult to analyze due to the processes happening within the first half of the year. But we hope that you will be interested not only in the short analysis for each of the directions that we have. And by the way, there were a lot of questions about human rights. You can find the separate chapter about human rights. You can find a separate chapter about Ukrainian abroad, about climate change, about other initiatives, if you're interested in more in detail what is now. But also we hope that those recommendations that all our experts proposed, some of them are very narrow and detailed, some of them are very broad, can be those assistance to the MFA, but not only MFA, because just as a small reminder, we evaluate not MFA work, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs work. We evaluated all actors within Ukraine who are involved in elaboration and implementation of foreign policy. So the scores that we have, it is the scores for Ukraine as a country, for Office of the President, for Parliament, for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for other ministries, and sometimes even for us as the expert community, because in topics as public diplomacy, you can find definitely issues connected with the activities of not only Ukrainian Prism, but other big NGOs who try to promote Ukraine abroad or for foreigners in Ukraine. So we open for further discussions, and as the initiative came from Petro, he jumped ahead of our announcement in the end that we are planning within the next month or two organize several more narrow discussions about some of the aspects that we analyzed. So now challenge accepted about the public diplomacy. We hope that we should have economic diplomacy, if I'm not mistaken, yep, Hennadiy, and one or another of the more specific topics. And I hope that we will have all of you with us. Please follow the Facebook announcements and those in emails from Ukrainian Prism, and we will be ready to discuss not only what happened last year, but also how to go ahead, how to go forward. So it will be more interesting to analyze year 2020.
Thank you, Hanna. I'd like to shift to Marcel Rutik. Marcel, do you want to add anything to discussion as a final remark?
Nothing to add from my side, just our thanks to the whole team, to the colleagues from the MFA, Petro Besta and Dmytro Kuleba for being with us. Those times, sorry for the technical inconveniences due to the translation mislead. However, I see that still many people are following us, and people didn't leave us just for the fact that we continued in English. Thanks for being with us. Stay healthy, stay distant, and hope to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcel. And from my side, I would like to reiterate the Hanna's words about that we want to have concentrated, focused events. And we already selected some issues like economic diplomacy. And also we would like to look in depth on Asia region, because obviously it is a high priority for MFA this time. So it will be our pleasure to have you all, our distinct participants, on board. We will inform you via email, and if it is within your interest, please join us, maybe in the end of this month or next month. And with this, I would like to thank you for your time spent with us. We have overrun it for roughly 10 minutes, but I think the interest is great. I would like to thank to our partners from Ebert-Stiftung, to MFA, for their participation and for their assistance in this study. And stay healthy. This is maybe the best way to end the discussion. And thank you for your time. Bye-bye.